Hey, in this video, we're going to explore functions in more detail. We already got a preview of functions when we looked at console.log and some methods on arrays in the last section. Now, let's try creating functions from scratch. The primary way to create a function in JavaScript is to use the function declaration syntax. To declare a function, use the function keyword. Then let's give this function a name. Call it calculateTip. Quick side note, notice that the T for tip is capital. The casing convention I'm using here is called camel casing. In this convention, when you join words together to make name, you capitalize the first letter of every joined word, and the effect is that the word ends up looking like it has the humps of a camel. Hence the name camel casing. Now, you're going to find that most JavaScript projects use camel casing. Other projects apply snake casing, which uses underscores. Feel free to use the convention you're comfortable with as long as you stay consistent. All right, back to the topic of the video. So the function can have any number of parameters, which goes within a pair of parentheses. For calculateTip, let's give it two parameters. One is price, and the second one is going to be percentage. Then the function body is a block of code. So open up a pair of curly braces. Cool, so that's a function that has been created from scratch. Later in the code, you can call the function using its name and then a pair of parentheses. Once you have that, go ahead and run the read eval print loop. You'll notice that by default, functions return undefined. Now, functions that return undefined can still serve a purpose. For example, it's very common to have a console.log within the function. So let's do a console.log of calculating tip as a string. Go ahead and run this, and you should see the output of calculating tip. Now, this console.log didn't have an effect on the return value. Therefore, it's a side effect. It's still part of the function, but it's not directly related in the calculation of the return value over here. So keep this concept of a side effect in mind. It's a concept that you'll hear often. There are functions like this that use their side effects, or rather are only used for their side effects, like console.logs. And then there are functions without side effects that are only used to calculate and return a value. For example, comment out the console.log line and then return 5. Now, this is a function without side effects. It's being purely used for its calculated return value. Then there are functions which do both. For example, if you uncomment the console.log line, the side effect of calculating tip will happen, as well as the return value of 5, which is then used. Cool. Now, let's update this function to actually factor in these parameters. For example, say the price of your meal is 50. Well, let's pass in 50 as a price. And then the percentage you want to tip at is at 18% because you're pretty fair and generous. So to calculate this, well, first, we're going to want to look at that whole number percentage divided by 100. So a useful number for percentages is the decimal number, not the whole number. So that way we're getting 0.18 instead of 18. And then we can multiply that calculation by the price to get the overall return tip and go ahead and return that entire calculation as the final return line in the function. When you evaluate this, you'll find that the tip is properly calculated to 9. Cool, so overall, this has been an example of function declaration. Again, this is an example of function declaration. Notice that the function declaration syntax works very much like a variable declaration. The function keyword is in the exact spot where var normally would be when declaring a variable. As an alternative to the function declaration syntax, you can write a function expression. A function expression is quite similar to the function declaration, but the difference is where you create the name for the function. So let's create a variable this time and call it divide by n. So this is variable declaration, and we can set this to a function expression. So now we have the function keyword over here. We open up the function parameters with a pair of parentheses, and this function also has a block of code for its body. Let's label this as a function expression. So notice the key difference here. The declaration at the top uses the function keyword to declare the calculate tip function, whereas the function expression is like a value. It's being assigned to an existing variable. Let's give divide by n two parameters, the number we want to divide as well as n itself. And the return value over here is going to be the number divided by n. Let's go ahead and call this new divide by n function as well. So we have divide by n and then pass in 18 and 3 as the parameters. Once you have all of that, go ahead and run the REPL. And as seen, the function does its job. It returns 6 by dividing 18 by 3. So there's a question to be asked. Why are there two ways to create functions in JavaScript? Why do you need the function declaration syntax if there's already the function expression syntax? Likewise, why have the function expression syntax if there's already the declaration syntax? Well, one of the main reasons to have this distinction is that the function expression allows you to leave a function nameless. You don't have to give a function a name if you use a function expression. So let's go ahead and create a new function expression that does a console.log. At the bottom of the program, go ahead and create a function. And in that function itself, within the body, have it say I am an expression. Cool. Once you have that, go ahead and run the program. If you run this, you're going to find an error. This is because if you start a line with the function keyword, JavaScript thinks that you intend to use a function declaration. So notice that the first keyword for a line is function. So it says, hey, you want to declare something, so we're going to go with the function declaration syntax here. But this isn't the case over here. We're creating an expression, which is denoted by the fact that we're immediately following with this pair of parentheses. So to avoid the syntax error, wrap the entire thing within a pair of parentheses. If you run this now, well, it's going to evaluate a function. And now there isn't an error within the console. So you successfully created a function over here without naming it, using a function expression. And this is now an anonymous function. After all, it doesn't have a name. Now here's something cool. You can still call the anonymous function. To call a function, use a pair of parentheses to invoke it after the entire creation of the anonymous function itself. When you run this, you get the log I am an expression. Cool. So it may be a bit weird to have these pair of parentheses one after the other. But keep in mind that this is the same as using a variable instead. For example, we can mock this divide by n functionality. We can achieve it by giving this function the same parameters of number and n. Then let's go ahead and return number divided by n as the result of this anonymous function. And then within the call of these parentheses, we're passing in 18 and 3. So by examining these two chunks of code, you can see how var divide by n is a variable that is a placeholder for this entire function expression itself. We're doing the same thing without creating a variable. We're creating the function expression, and once that is created, we're invoking it with the same 18 and 3 parameters. And if you run this, you should find that the REPL evaluates 6 for the anonymous function. Excellent. So in summary, there are two ways to create functions. One, use the function declaration syntax, or two, create a function expression. In addition, function expressions also allow you to create nameless anonymous functions. Since function expressions are commonplace in JavaScript code, there's actually an alternative syntax you can use. The alternative is to use an arrow function. They're almost exactly like function expressions, but they offer a cleaner syntax. However, there's some more advanced under the hood details which make arrow functions special. But let's focus on the syntax first, which is going to be the topic of the next video. So I'll see you there.